So, welcome everybody. Now the clock just ticked 12 o'clock, and we're going to deep dive into this very interesting phase 3 study and the design of the study for InDex Pharmaceuticals. And with me today, I have the CEO of InDex Pharmaceuticals, Peter Sahuni, and the Chief Medical Officer, Thomas Gnidl. And I would like to welcome the audience as well. And as always on our platform, you're more than welcome to post questions. Do it in the chat on your right side in the bottom, and I will forward the questions to the presenters. And with that, I would like to hand over the word to Peter Sahuni. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you very much, Klaus. So my name is Peter Sahuni. I'm the CEO of InDex, and today I'm joined by Dr. Thomas Gnidl, our Chief Medical Officer, in this second part of our deep dive series. So last time we deep dove into the previous clinical data that Thomas presented, and today the focus will be on the phase 3 design. But first, we have our standard disclaimer for forward-looking statements. And I want to give a brief introduction to InDex as a background. InDex is a Swedish biotech company, and we're developing a drug to be able to help patients suffering from ulcerative colitis, like Felicia here in the picture, to live a normal life. And we do that by primarily developing our lead drug candidate, cobitolimod, for ulcerative colitis, where we have now started phase 3. And phase 3 is the last stage of development before you can apply for marketing approval for a drug. Apart from cobitolimod, we have a broad portfolio of chemically similar assets, but they're in much earlier development stage, so the focus will be on cobitolimod in this talk. We are listed on the Nasdaq First North Growth Market in Stockholm since 5 years, and we have a market cap of about 850 million. Early last year, we raised more than 500 million Swedish crowns in an oversubscribed rights issue to fund phase 3 development. And in that process, we also strengthened the shareholder base. And our largest shareholder today is Link, which is the investment company of Bengt Jolander, focusing on life science. We have the Swiss specialist fund, HBM. We have the fourth national pension fund in Sweden, and we have Handelsbanken funds. Together, they have about 40% of the company. But in total, we have more than 5,000 shareholders. So we have a large retail following as well. That's a little bit on the company. Ulcerative colitis, then, it's a debilitating disease with a high unmet medical need. It's caused by chronic inflammation of the colon that leads to ulcers. And it's a lifelong disease. There is no cure today, although there are various drugs that can be used to treat the disease. There is no cure. The disease comes in active periods, flares, and in between those you can have inactive periods, so periods of remission. But when you're in a flare, you suffer from the typical symptoms of very frequent blood and mucus mixed loose stools. As I mentioned, there are a number of drugs and therapies on the market today to treat particularly the moderate to severe ulcerative colitis, where we're focusing. But a lot of patients do not respond to these treatments, and they can cause severe side effects. So there is a high unmet need for new drugs with new mechanisms of action, with efficacy and safety. And the safety aspect has been in focus lately because, well, we all know that it's well known that the current drugs are tough drugs, but one of the drug classes, the JAK inhibitors, got an updated restriction by the FDA a couple of months ago, where the FDA said it's not only dangerous, it can actually cause death as well. And they were firmly put in the last line of treatment here, and it spurred a big discussion about the safety of the drugs in this indication. And this is where we come in then with cobitolimod, our lead drug candidate, which is a first-in-class treatment, because we offer exactly what the market is looking for here. We have at least as good efficacy or effect as the current drugs, but with a superior safety profile. So we've had a very, very clean safety profile in our development so far. That might be explained by the way we give this drug. It's a local treatment. We give it in the form of an enema. You have the photo there. So we give it rectally once every 3 weeks, so not so often. And the drug basically only works in the colon where you actually have the inflammation, so you don't get any off-target effects. And we have a novel mechanism of action. We have a new and unique way of addressing this disease biologically. And this excellent safety profile and unique mechanism of action makes this a very good candidate for combination therapy in the longer run, because there's more and more thoughts from the field that you might need to combine several drugs to break through the inflammation in the more difficult cases in ulcerative colitis. And just last week, there was a big medical conference for inflammatory bowel disease where the keynote speaker really put the focus on combination therapy as a future area to explore in this therapeutic field. So we have done quite a bit of clinical development, a couple of studies before the phase 3 study that is now ongoing in the moderate to severe patients. So those that have a bit more difficult disease that have failed other treatments. And we met the primary endpoint in our phase 2b study, which forms the basis for the phase 3 development. And in addition, we have 4 other clinical studies. So we see that cobitolimod has a large commercial potential. We think it can sell for more than $1 billion per year, given this outstanding combination of efficacy and safety and the novel mechanism of action. The market for ulcerative colitis, or potential market, is very large. So if we only look at the cobitolimod's total addressable market, it's more than 9 billion. So you have a couple of million patients with ulcerative colitis in the Western world, and more than half of those have moderate to severe ulcerative colitis. And we are focusing on patients with left-sided disease because of our mode of administration, the enema, which is a bit more than half of the patients. So all in all, we think there are about 400 patients that could use a treatment like this. And if you apply the price of the most recently launched products in this indication to that number of patients, you arrive at an annual potential market of more than $9 billion per year.
Sorry, Peter, you mentioned 400 patients. It's 400,000 patients.
Sorry, 400,000 patients. Sorry. But I should also stress that this is a theoretically addressable market. Not all these patients will ever actually access an advanced therapy like this. So the actual market is smaller today, but it's growing quite a lot because more and more patients get access to these advanced therapies. I can also mention that in December, Pfizer made a bid to acquire Arena Pharmaceuticals for $6.7 billion, and Arena Pharmaceuticals has a phase 3 asset in exactly ulcerative colitis. And Pfizer stated that the majority of the $6.7 billion were for that drug candidate and its potential in ulcerative colitis and inflammatory bowel disease. So that's really a validation of the market potential here and the attractiveness of this market.
How does Arena Pharmaceuticals product differ from your product, Peter?
It's a different mechanism of action. So it has a different way of addressing the disease. It's a systemic treatment. So while ours is a local topical treatment, they have a pill, and the drug actually affects the whole body. So we think from a safety perspective, we have an advantage there, that we don't get so-called off-target effects that they have. They actually have an effect on the heart rate and infections and such. So we still think we have a better safety profile than they do, although they're deemed one of the milder potential treatments in this indication.
Thanks.
And of course, they've actually, at the end of their phase 3 study, we will have their results anytime now, and we are in the beginning, so they're a little bit ahead of us.
Thanks a lot.
So as I mentioned, we had positive phase 2b data, and that was actually published in the very prestigious journal, the Lancet Gastroenterology and Hepatology. And this is what Thomas covered in the last deep dive we had. So please go back and watch that if you're interested in the details. But with those positive phase 2b data, we started our path towards phase 3, and we had successful interactions with both FDA and EMA, the US and European regulatory agencies that both endorsed that we now move into phase 3. And the study design that Thomas will present was, we came up with that in consultation with both these agencies, which means the study can serve as basis for marketing approval in both the US and Europe. So this is for a global approval, the study we're doing. We also have strong support from key opinion leaders, the top professors in the field, both in the US and in Europe. We have advisory boards established, and they find this a very exciting opportunity. And we've conducted quite a bit of primary market research that supports this commercial potential of more than $1 billion per year in sale. We've talked to both specialist physicians that really like the efficacy to safety ratio, and they're very likely to prescribe cobitolimod to a significant portion of their patients in the future. And we've talked to payers that confirm that we can price in line with the recently launched products in this area. So with that, we arrived at the phase 3 design that I will now hand over to Dr. Thomas Knittel to present.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Peter. Now it's a pleasure for me to explain you our phase 3 program, which is called Conclude. It's a standard phase 3 program as it is requested by FDA and EMA. And this type of program exists of so-called 2 induction studies and a maintenance study. In the induction study, you include patients with an active disease. You treat them with your drug, in our case cobitolimod, given 2 times at week 0 and 3 weeks later at week 3. Then you check the efficacy of your drug, whether it helps, with your primary endpoint, which we measure at 6 weeks. And then these patients responding to the drug, either getting into remission, meaning we are not anymore in an active disease state, or are improving, what we call responders. These patients are then offered to be included into the so-called maintenance study, which runs for another 46 weeks. So in total, the whole program is 52 weeks. During the maintenance study, these patients are treated by self-administration of the NMR every 3rd week with cobitolimod. And the idea in the maintenance study, or the aim of the maintenance study, is to check whether the patients which are in remission are kept in remission with a treatment. So this is a standard program, as I said, 2 induction studies and the maintenance study. In our case, we have a little bit special in that we execute our induction studies in a sequential manner. So we start with the first induction study, which actually has started. And once we have the results of the first induction study, the second induction study will be started. And the benefit of such a sequential approach is that we can use the data from the first induction study to optimize the second induction study and thereby de-risk the overall program.
Thomas,
yes.
Thomas, there's a small question here.
Yeah.
Is it possible to change or adjust the dose you use in the study?
It's a good question, because in the first induction study, actually, we will adjust the dose, and I will come back to that later.
Sorry?
Usually, it is not allowed. Usually, you have to stay with the dose, unless you have an adaptive design, or what we call adaptive design, and this is exactly what we have in the first induction study. So give me a couple of more minutes and I will come back to that.
That's okay. Thanks a lot.
So, as I said, the first induction study has already started, and the design is based on our successful phase 2b study. And also as a de-risk measure, of course, in a huge phase 3 program, you don't want to enter too many variables, new variables. So you try to stick to your phase 2b program, and this is what we are actually doing. So we will treat the same patient population, patients with a moderate to severe left-sided UC. These patients should have failed conventional therapy and or biologics or other more advanced therapies, as we have done in the phase 2b program. As in the phase 2b program, we will give 2 doses of cobitolimod at week 0 and week 3. The 250 milligram dose, this was the one which was successful in the phase 2b program, provided statistical significant effects. And this is now new, we will introduce one additional dose, a 500 milligram dose, because we have now more tox data available, which allows us to give humans a higher dose, the 500 milligram dose. And we will do this in an adaptive design. I will come back to that later. And of course, the idea to include a higher dose is that we see the potential to provide even a better efficacy with a higher dose. So 1 additional dose. The primary endpoint, as in our phase 2b program, is still measured at week 6 and measured by clinical remission, as requested by FDA and EMA, and you see the definition beyond the primary endpoint. So this is also, again, the same. And of course, as in every clinical study, we will measure safety endpoints, but here we do not expect major news, because in all our previous clinical studies, we have not really seen a safety signal. And I mean, this is also one advantage of this compound and the mode of administration. So this is the basic design of our induction study. And as I said, we have an adaptive design. So in total, 440 patients will be included into this first induction study. And the study will start with 2 doses of cobitolimod compared to placebo. You see here 250 milligram and 500 milligram. After about a third of all the patients, meaning 44 patients per arm, we will perform an interim analysis to select the best dose. This interim analysis will be done outside of InDex by an independent committee using predefined parameters to select what is the best dose. And this is dependent on how effective are these doses, in also taking into account safety aspects. InDex is, during this interim analysis, blinded, so we will not have really access to the patient data, but we will be informed what is the best dose, so what of these 2 doses is selected, and then the study will continue with the best dose. So we will treat another 154 patients with this dose to measure then at 6 weeks after study start, or 6 weeks after treatment start, our primary endpoint, clinical remission. So if you then do the numbers, so we have 44 patients from this stage 1 and another 154 patients from stage 2. So in total, 198 patients receiving the best dose of commitolimod, which are compared to placebo to measure the primary endpoint. So this is this adaptive design.
Thomas, there's a couple of questions about the design, because could I post them now?
Let's take them now.
There's obviously some benefits with a sequential study, but as I see from the questions in the chat, people are used to see, you make a phase 3 study, or you make a study in general for one particular project and one particular dose. And here you have 2 doses. So there's some questions about the time length of the program. Is it then longer than usual, or do you have some obvious benefits with these 2 arms?
Well, we do not expect that the program will take much longer, because we will use the same sites to recruit for induction study number 1 and induction study number 2. So no major effects on timing. Maybe we have a little bit a delay of 1 or 2 months because we have to do this interim analysis, but not major delays. And the advantage, of course, is that we can test 1 additional dose to see whether we get better effect. Sometimes it is also done by other companies, mainly during the maintenance phase, to test 2 different doses. So it's not a complete novel that 2 doses are tested. But I agree, usually you test 1 dose. But with this adaptive design, we have the chance to analyze whether a higher dose has even higher efficacy.
Can I add there that typically the big pharma companies have been doing the induction studies, 2 induction studies in parallel, but you only have a certain number of sites recruiting. So then they have to split between those 2 studies. So instead here we have all our sites recruiting for the first induction study first, and then all the sites recruiting for the second induction study. So I can echo Thomas that it shouldn't take longer than other programs, because if you do them sequentially or in parallel, you still need to find a certain number of patients.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks a lot. That clarifies a lot. There's a couple of questions about recruitment and so on and so forth, but maybe we should take them a little later. So if Thomas continue.
Maybe I take the next slide, because this explains our study status. So it is a global study done worldwide in Europe, US, and Asia, including a couple of 100 sites in over 30 countries. So it's a major undertaking. We hired again Parexel as our CRO, which is basically executing the study, and Parexel was also the CRO which was involved in our phase 2b study. We enrolled the first patient end of last year, and we estimate that it will take about 18 to 24 months to complete the first induction study, to give you a rough timeline. You should also keep in mind that I talked a lot about the induction study, but the maintenance study will also run in parallel. So we will hand over and transfer these patients once they are responding or in remission after 6 weeks into this maintenance study. And as I told you about the interim analysis to select the best dose, we expect that to be done end of this year, end of 2022. So this is basically the program. As I said, it's a standard program with some special features. And now I would like to hand over to Peter again, or should we take the questions regarding the phase 3 program right now?
Why don't you do that?
Yeah, for sure. So there's a couple of questions about how many patients you enrolled, and I know that you will inform the market, going forward, but you don't want to inform on specific patients, if I'm right. But maybe Peter, you could elaborate a little about how you enroll patients and in what pace you normally see these patients enroll. Thomas already clarified about for what we should looking for 18 to 24 months, but maybe you can clarify a little on that, Peter.
Yeah, I think Thomas can maybe add a bit more on the status to start with, and then I can follow up.
Good.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we are still in the startup phase, and a typical enrollment in a clinical study, especially with so many countries and sites, is you have a relatively low start, and when all the sites are active, when it really speeds up. And but to give you a little bit a flavor, right now we have from 11 countries out of these 30 plus countries a regulatory approval to execute the study and are activating the sites in these countries. So we are still in the startup phase, but that is also what we expect. I mean, it was also the experience we have done in our phase 2b study. It takes really, 30 countries, then it takes really time to activate these countries, because we have to get regulatory work and administrative work done in every country, for every site, and that is a pretty time-consuming process. So you do not start from one day to the other with all the sites.
No. Yeah, thanks a lot, Thomas.
Yeah, there was also a COVID question. I don't know if you want to comment on that, Thomas. How we're affected by COVID.
Yeah, of course we also feel COVID, and as I said, it's a lot of administration to start a study, and both the clinics, both the regulatory authorities, both the administration in the clinics are of course involved in somehow COVID-related activities. So in contrast to our phase 2b study, we experienced a certain delay in getting all this work done. So we are somehow affected by COVID, but especially since January this year, we feel a lot of activity from the clinics to really get the studies done, get the paperwork done, because you shouldn't forget the patients are still around despite COVID. You still have UC patients which get their flare, which get their active disease, which need medical treatment.
Mm-hmm. So we had wanted to start the study earlier last year, but then COVID, we saw it was difficult to get enough clinics to get started. But then end of last year, we saw that the time was right to really activate the study. So now we see that we get, as Thomas said, it's better and better responsiveness from the clinics, and everybody are looking forward to start new projects now. So you really feel there is more of a pull effect from the clinics. And we expect a number of new countries to be added here in the coming weeks. So, and I also wanted to add that what we've seen from other studies is, well, I mean, all clinical studies have, starting during the pandemic, have had issues. Klaus, did you disappear? Okay. The pandemic has made it difficult to start studies, but as Thomas said, the patients are still around and they've been receiving their care all the time. So clinical studies in ulcerative colitis that started before the pandemic have been able to keep their timelines during the study. So that makes us confident that the patients are around. If you can only get the clinics engaged, they will include them. Klaus dropped out. I can read the chat. Has the first patient completed the treatment? Will you communicate that? I don't think we will communicate each patient. I mean, there are 440 patients, but is at the end of the 6 weeks at least somewhere. So if I got it right, there's only one active patient in the study at the moment. So we do not have that many patients in the study yet, but that's what we expected. But as Thomas said, this is to be expected at starting off at low levels, and then it will increase as we add countries and sites. But we don't provide the exact number of patients in this call. Are you back, Klaus?
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry, there was some technical flash here, but it's good that you took over as the moderator, Peter. So, and you,
so I just read off the chat there. I don't know if I've seen all of them.
So you comment on this with the treatment, complete treatment, if you're going to communicate.
I think the questions from the chat are answered.
Good. So good.
I mean, it doesn't really. I mean, the study is blinded to us, so it won't really tell us anything about what each patient does. So.
And that's important to understand, because that's the way you normally design a study.
Yeah. So InDex will not know how the study is going, in the sense, does this work or not, because we don't know who gets placebo and who gets active. So, and we expect a number of patients on placebo to become really healthy, because that's you have you have a meaningful placebo rate in this disease. So that's why we can't look at individual patients.
And then there's
not allowed to get this information.
No, exactly, because then it's very important that it's objective when you evaluate the data. But I can recommend the viewers, first of all, to listen to the video we did before New Year about the design of the phase 2 study and the results from the phase 2 study, because you're really piggybacking on that. And you already, announced very good results, both on efficacy, but also on safety. And that's one thing. And then there's quite a lot of good information on InDex Pharmaceuticals homepage regarding this study. And then I think, as Thomas mentioned, there's a question here about when will you inform about the dose choice, and you will probably do that after the 18 to 24 months.
No, I think we can actually. The interim analysis is blinded to InDex regarding the effects, but we will know which dose moves forward, and that we will be able to communicate to the market then end of this year. When we expect that.
InDex also needs to know what is the best dose, because we have to provide the drug.
Operationally, it becomes challenging not to know the dose for us.
No,
so then we will also tell the market.
Yeah.
I see one question regarding our expectations on the 500 milligram dose. So in the phase 2b study, the 250 milligram dose was the most effective. And so we have not reached our limits, I would say. So as the 250 milligram dose was effective, there's a certain likelihood that if you increase the dose further, you could have a better effect. So we have not really reached our limit.
No, the threshold. No.
Yeah.
Now that's quite interesting. Then at the end here, there's a question about funding, Peter, and that's always interesting. You took in money last year, January, but could you elaborate a little on that, Peter? For how long do these funds last, and are you able to take the whole phase 3 study on those funds?
Yeah,
Please.
so the money we raised are destined for this first induction study. So we've secured financing for the first induction study. And then we will read that out and report that data, which will, of course, put us in a very different position than today if we have one positive phase 3 study. So assuming good results in the first induction study, we'll be in a very strong position. And from a strategic perspective, we want to keep all our options open. Our main shareholders are well-capitalized, long-term investors, but we will also naturally consider adding additional investors or partnering at attractive terms at that point. But I think it would be premature to speculate now exactly how we will fund that. Regarding commercialization, we also don't have to make any decisions now before the study. So we will have time, given that we still have to do the second induction study, to set up either partner or set up our own commercialization structure for this. But we're looking into the commercialization issue, really what's required in different regions of the world. So we will be able to communicate at least the prerequisites during this study.
Yeah, and it's not like a very good answer on the question, Peter, but you're open for all possibilities, as I remember, both partnering or take it all the way yourself, or combination of those.
Exactly.
Good. Well, if there's no further questions, there's a question coming in here. I can see 2 seconds, Peter and Thomas. Is there any plans to do additional studies in Asia, Japan? You touch upon that, Thomas, in your presentation.
We have sites in Asia, and we are currently in talks with the Japanese authorities to be able to initiate also the second induction study in Japan. So not additional studies, but expanding this program also in Asia and Japan.
And as the audience see this slide that's still live, you see that in the conclude study, InDex Pharmaceuticals actually have a couple of hundred sites in 30 countries, including countries in Asia. So it's really a big study, as both Thomas and Peter mentioned.
And this is unfortunately the number also needed to run a phase 3 program. So in also our competitors, we are in the same dimensions, sometimes even higher. It is a major effort.
But it's truly global. We'll be in Asia, but Europe, US, South America. So we're, as we said, in over 30 countries we expect in the end, with a couple of hundred sites.
Yeah, but that's it. You see, Peter, as well. There's a question here coming in.
So the formal plan is 30 countries, 30 plus countries, and a few hundred sites. So now we're applying for approval in these 30 countries, and as we get approvals, we activate sites that we of course speak to and line up before the approval. So this is the plan. And
for the audience, one time again, you are able to actually see this on InDex Pharmaceuticals homepage and on HC Andersen as well. And if you have further questions, please post us a mail. You find the mails on both company sites, and I'm sure that both Peter and I will answer them as fast as possible. So
yeah,
with that,
maybe just quickly wrap up with the
Peter.
investment opportunity here. Ulcerative colitis causes major suffering and costs for patients and societies. InDex has blockbuster potential, meaning more than $1 billion of sales per year, because the high unmet medical need for new treatment options and our outstanding combination of efficacy and safety with this novel mechanism of action. And we're now a phase 3 company. We've initiated patient recruitment, and we have secured the financing until the next pivotal readout of clinical data, which also addresses one of the last questions here, that yes, we will absolutely communicate the outcome of this study as soon as it's done in 18 to 24 months. And that will then serve as the basis for the next steps of the company.
Sure. Well, there's a small question coming in respect of your platform, Peter, and we didn't touch a lot on that, but that's due to we made a deep dive today into the phase 3 design and not the company in general. But if it's okay with you, Peter, could you make a very small comment on that? Or
yeah, so that's we should maybe do a deep dive on the whole platform at one point. But we are working on a couple of different. We've selected a couple of other assets that we're now evaluating in models of inflammatory diseases that are not inflammatory bowel disease, and we hope to have results also during this year. But those projects have really been affected by COVID because labs were closed and you weren't able to do work there. But we can probably get back to that.
For sure, Peter. That's a part of our plan, yeah, to make a deep dive into that area as well. With that said, and almost 1:15 your time, first of all, I would like to thank Thomas for joining us today and make a deep dive into the study. And of course, a big thank you to Peter as well. And then I would like to say thank you to the audience for all the good questions actually on this event. And hope to see you soon again. And within a couple of hours, you will find the video both on my page, HCAcapital.dk, and InDex Pharmaceuticals site as well. With that said, have a very nice day, and thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye.